When I was 7, my mom packed her bags, kissed me on the forehead, and said she'd be back after the weekend. She never came back. 21 years later, she knocked on my door, with a son I'd never met, and demanded the house I built for myself. Stick with me while I share my story, and if it touches you, don't forget to support our channel by hitting that subscribe button, dropping a like, and sharing it with the people you care about. My name's Tessa Rayner, and I was raised by no one but the system. My mom, Leanne, vanished one Saturday morning, leaving me with a neighbor and a note that said, "I'll be back soon." Soon turned into years. I waited by windows, birthdays passed, and by the time I turned 10, I understood. She wasn't coming back. Life after that was rough. I bounced between foster homes until I aged out. I worked 2 jobs, saved every dollar, and built a small house on a quiet stretch of land in Oregon. It wasn't much, but it was mine. For the first time, I felt safe. I had a garden, a dog, and silence. I thought the past was behind me. Then came the knock. I opened the door, and there she was, Leanne. Her hair was streaked gray, her smile wide like nothing had happened. Beside her stood a teenage boy, maybe 16, wearing expensive sneakers and a bored look. "Tessa," she said, like we'd just spoken yesterday. "This is Dylan, your brother." I froze. Brother? She never told me she'd had another child. Before I could speak, she walked right in, looking around like she owned the place. Dylan followed, chewing gum, scrolling on his phone. Leanne laughed softly. "It's small but cozy. I knew my girl would make something of herself." I just stared. My chest felt tight. "Why are you here?" She sighed dramatically. "We need a place to stay. Times have been hard since your stepfather passed. Family should help each other, right?" That word, family, cut deep. She hadn't been one for 2 decades. I told her the truth. "You can't stay here, Mom. This is my home." Her face changed. The sweet smile dropped, and I saw something cold behind her eyes. "Don't be selfish, Tessa. You owe me. I gave you life." Dylan smirked, looking me up and down. "Mom said you'd be like this. Always the victim." My hands shook. "You don't even know me." He shrugged. "Don't need to. Mom says you've got a good job, a house. You'll be fine." I realized then, they hadn't come to reconnect. They came to take. Leanne started walking through the rooms, touching things like they were hurt. "You did good," she said, voice flat. "And I think it's time you shared what you've built. We're family." That word again, sharp as a knife. She wasn't asking for help. She was claiming ownership. I stood in the doorway, heart pounding, realizing the truth I never wanted to face. My mother hadn't come back to make things right. She came back to take everything I'd built from the ruins she left behind. I still remember that window, the small square of glass in the kitchen where I used to sit on my knees, waiting for her car to come back down the gravel road. Every afternoon, I'd watch until the sun slipped behind the pine. I'd tell myself she was just late, that something had delayed her. By the second week, I stopped eating dinner at the table. I'd sit by that window instead, staring out into the dark, whispering that maybe tomorrow she'd come. She never did. After a while, the neighbor who'd been watching me said she couldn't keep me any longer. I was shuffled to an aunt for a few months, then a cousin I barely knew. Each house smelled different, some like dust, some like cigarettes, none like home. I learned to keep a small bag packed because I never knew when someone would say, "It's time for you to move." In foster care, I stopped asking when my mom would come. I stopped asking anything at all. The only thing I learned was how to stay quiet, how to keep my distance so no one could hurt me when they decided they'd had enough. Trust became something I didn't understand anymore. When Leanne showed up after all those years, she didn't just bring herself. She brought every piece of that broken childhood back with her. I thought I had buried it. Turns out, it had only been sleeping, waiting for her knock to wake it up again. She moved around my house like she still had the right. Every word she said scraped at something I'd locked away. Dylan didn't help. The boy strutted around as if the floorboards were built for him. He flipped through my mail, laughed at my old furniture, and made comments about how tight I must be with money. He didn't see me as a person, just someone who had what he wanted. One night, I caught him going through my kitchen drawers. When I asked what he was doing, he shrugged. "Looking for snacks. You don't got anything good." His tone was full of mockery, like he belonged there and I was the guest. Leanne laughed from the couch. "He's just being a boy, Tessa. Don't be so uptight." That voice, the same one I used to dream about, now sounded like static. It filled the rooms I'd once loved with noise I couldn't stand. Every glance she gave me pulled me back to that 7-year-old girl sitting by the window, waiting for someone who would never return. I could feel the past pressing down on me, heavy and suffocating. I tried to tell myself she was here now, that maybe there was still something to salvage. But then Dylan threw his muddy shoes on my couch and asked if I'd clean it up later. That's when I knew. The child who waited by the window was still inside me, but she wasn't waiting anymore. She was watching, ready this time, not to hope, but to fight. Leanne stood in the center of the living room, arms crossed, staring at the walls like she was taking inventory. You know, she said finally, this house should belong to our family. It's not right for you to keep everything to yourself. I set my coffee down slowly. Our family? The word felt heavy. No one else built this place, Leanne. I did. Every inch of it. She gave a small laugh. You wouldn't even have the chance if it weren't for me. You're my daughter. What's yours is ours. The calm I'd been holding on to began to crack. I worked 2 jobs for years. I lived out of a car before this. You didn't help me. You didn't even call. Dylan leaned against the doorway, grinning like it was all a game. You sound so dramatic. Mom told me you always played the victim. Maybe you're just jealous she actually moved on and had a real family. I turned to him. Jealous? Of what? He shrugged. Of us. Of her being happy without you. I looked back at Leanne, searching for any sign of guilt, but she just smoothed her shirt and said, he's not wrong. I had a good life, Tessa. Things were fine until recently. Recently? I asked. Her eyes flicked away. Your stepfather passed. He left complications. I don't want to get into it, but you could make things easier. Let us stay until I figure things out. Figure what out? I asked, my voice shaking now. She sighed like I was the one being unreasonable. You've got room. We're family. You owe me that much. That word again, oh. She said it so easily, like she hadn't vanished from my life for decades. I crossed my arms. I don't owe you anything. Dylan scoffed, his smirk sharpening. Wow, no wonder she left you. You're cold. Something inside me twisted, but I kept my voice steady. You have no idea what she left behind. He laughed under his breath, and I could see where he got it. The same careless arrogance in both of them. Then Leanne dropped her next line like it was nothing. You know, you should be grateful. I helped you more than you think. Years ago, I used your name for some paperwork, just small things. You were a kid. You didn't need credit yet. My stomach dropped. You did what? She waved her hand. It wasn't a big deal. Your stepfather said we'd pay it back, but then things changed. My pulse pounded in my ears. You used my name? For money. Her smile thinned. You'll survive. You always do. I stared at her, realizing the truth wasn't new. It had just been hiding. She hadn't come to ask. She came to claim. To take what she thought she deserved, the way she always had. And for the first time, I saw her clearly, not as the mother I lost, but as the stranger standing in my house, daring to call it ours. That night, when the house had finally gone quiet, I sat at the kitchen table with a box of papers I hadn't touched in years. Bills, old letters, records I'd kept out of habit. I needed proof, something to make sense of what she'd said earlier. My hands shook as I opened the envelopes one by one, spreading the contents across the table. At first, it was just overdue notices I remembered fighting to clear when I was younger. Then, near the bottom, I found it, a credit account opened when I was 16 in my name, with an address I'd never lived at. My stomach turned. Another one followed, then another. The signature was mine, except it wasn't. Her handwriting, crooked, rushed, too familiar to mistake. She had stolen from me before I even had a chance to build anything. The debt she left back then was the reason I couldn't rent my first apartment, the reason I'd lived out of my car for almost a year. All those nights I blamed myself for being careless. It had been her. I heard footsteps in the hallway and quickly gathered the papers. But Leanne was already standing there. Her face softened when she saw what I was holding. Oh, honey, she whispered, tears instantly forming. You weren't supposed to find that. My throat tightened. You used my name. You ruined my credit, and you didn't even tell me. She pressed a hand to her chest, shaking her head. You don't understand. I had to. We were drowning back then. You were just a kid. You didn't need it yet. A mother does what she has to. Her voice cracked at the end, and for a second, she almost sounded human again. But then I looked at her face. No real guilt, only fear of being caught. A mother doesn't steal from her child, I said quietly. She sniffled, turning away. You're being cruel. I did what I could with what I had. Before I could reply, Dylan walked in, half asleep, his voice dripping with annoyance. What's going on now? She's accusing me of terrible things, Leanne said quickly, her voice trembling. He frowned at me. You're unbelievable. She carried you, raised you. She left me. I cut in. He crossed his arms. You're ungrateful. You don't know what it's like for her. You think you're some kind of saint because you've got a job and a house. Newsflash, you're still alone. Leanne started crying harder, hiding her face in her hand. You see how she talks to me. The sound of her sobs filled the kitchen. It was the same sound I used to imagine when I thought of her, soft, helpless, a woman who needed saving. But now all I could hear was performance. Every tear, every sigh calculated. I stood there, holding the papers, realizing the truth was simple and sharp. She hadn't changed. Not one bit. Leanne didn't come back for forgiveness or love. She came back because she needed another hand to use, and this time, she thought it would still be mine. Days passed, and they didn't leave. Their bags spread across the hallway. Their clothes filled the laundry room. Their voices filled every quiet space I once loved. When I asked again when they planned to go, Leanne only smiled. You wouldn't throw your own mother out, would you? I tried reason. I tried patience. Nothing worked. Every morning, she made coffee like she owned the place, humming while Dylan sprawled on the couch, watching TV, shoes on my table. I called the sheriff's office, explained the situation, and was told I needed to file a formal eviction. Paperwork. Waiting. More time. I hung up with my hands shaking. When I told them, Dylan laughed. So, we're good then, he said, kicking back. Guess you'll have to deal with it. That night, I came home from work to find a shattered photo frame on the floor, my foster dad's picture. Dylan was in the kitchen, eating straight from a cereal box. You should really get better stuff, he muttered. This house is so sad. I knelt to pick up the pieces. You broke this? He didn't even look at me. Relax. It was ugly anyway. The way he said it, so careless, so smug, made something inside me twist. I swept up the glass, trying to breathe, but his words kept echoing. Later, from my room, I heard them in the living room, their voices low, laughing. She's got it good here, Dylan said. We could sell this place easy. Leanne's tone was cold. Don't talk too loud. Let her think we're staying a while. Once things are in order, we'll figure it out. Maybe she'll sign something if we play it right. I froze. Dylan chuckled. She's too uptight. You should see how she looks at me like I'm dirt. We deserve better than this dump. Leanne sighed. She owes me. After everything I've been through, she can spare a little. I stood there in the dark, listening to them plan, my pulse thudding in my ears. Every word was a blade. They weren't family. They were invaders, carving through the only peace I'd ever known. For weeks, I'd tried to believe this could end quietly, that I could reason with her, that maybe there was something worth saving. But hearing them that night ended all of it. The child inside me, the one who still hoped for an apology, finally went silent. I stepped back into my room, shut the door, and sat on the edge of the bed. The walls felt smaller, the air heavier. The smell of their perfume and cologne lingered in every corner, choking the life out of the home I built. That's when the thought came, not wild, not loud, just clear. I was done waiting for someone else to do the right thing. I was done being cornered. If they wanted a fight, they'd find out who I'd become without them. That night, I decided, whatever came next, I would never be the victim again. I woke before dawn, the house silent except for the hum of the refrigerator. My mind was clear for the first time in weeks. I didn't bother arguing anymore. Words had gotten me nowhere. It was time to think, not talk. While they slept, I started collecting proof, small things at first. I photographed the mess they'd made, the broken furniture, the letters they'd opened that weren't theirs. Then I went further. I searched through the old files Leanne had brought with her, pretending to tidy the living room. Between stacks of useless receipts, I found bank notices and collection letters, all addressed to her. None of them paid. One had my name listed as a reference. I slipped the letters into a folder and hid them behind the washing machine. When they woke up, I smiled. I even made pancakes, pretending to give up the fight. Leanne's guard dropped. She started talking too much again, bragging about people she'd borrowed from, relatives who'd stopped answering her calls. Dylan laughed at her stories like they were funny. They didn't notice me quietly recording everything on my phone. Later that afternoon, I walked over to the fence where my neighbor, Grant Holloway, was trimming his hedges. He'd lived there longer than anyone else on the street. Steady hands, calm eyes. We'd spoken only a few times, but he always seemed to know when to listen. He glanced up when he saw me. You look tired, Tessa. I am, I said softly. Can I ask you something? He leaned on his rake, nodding. If someone's staying in your house and refuses to leave, how would you handle it? He studied me for a long moment. You've got to protect what's yours, but do it smart. Don't lose your temper. People like that feed on reaction. Gather proof, keep calm, and make your move when it counts. I nodded. That's what I'm doing. He gave a faint smile. Good. You've got more strength than you think. When I went back inside, Dylan was asleep on the couch, music blasting through his headphones. Leanne sat by the window, talking on the phone. Her voice was sharp, urgent. No, I told you I don't have it. I'll get the money soon. I'm staying with my daughter. She doesn't know yet. I froze in the hallway. More lies. More damage waiting to happen. I took out my phone and hit record again. By the next morning, my folder was thicker. Photos, recordings, letters, everything I'd need. They still believed my silence meant surrender. Leanne started calling me sweetheart again, patting my shoulder like we were close. Dylan joked about our house and asked what room he could turn into a gym. I smiled through all of it, because now I had what I needed. They thought I'd given up. But every fake smile, every quiet moment was a step closer to the end. This wasn't just about taking my home back anymore. I was going to make sure they could never do this, to me or anyone else, ever again. By Sunday morning, I had everything I needed. The folder sat on the kitchen table, thick with every secret they'd tried to bury. I'd been patient long enough. It was time. I told them over breakfast that I wanted to talk. Just us. Leanne's eyes lit up, suspicion wrapped in false warmth. A family meeting? She said, smiling like the word itself fixed everything. Dylan barely looked up from his phone but grinned when I said there'd be food. I cooked, kept my tone light, pretended I was tired of fighting. When we sat down, I took a deep breath. I've been thinking, I said, sliding the folder closer. I don't want to carry this hate anymore. I want to forgive. Leanne reached across the table, her hand trembling just enough to look real. That's my girl, she whispered. I knew you'd come around. I let her believe it for one more second before opening the folder. Paper spilled out across the table, copies of letters, photos, printouts from bank accounts, and my phone beside them, already queued with recordings. Dylan frowned. What's all that? Leanne's smile faltered. Tessa, what are you doing? I pressed play. Their voices filled the room. Her promising someone she'd get money soon, his laughter about selling the house. Every word echoed off the walls. Her face went pale, then red. You were spying on me? She shouted. I was protecting myself, I said quietly. You lied. You used my name. You planned to steal from me again. She stood so fast the chair screeched backward. You think you're better than me? Everything you have came from me. You wouldn't exist without me. Her words shook, part fury, part panic. I met her eyes. You're right. You gave me life. But that's where your part ended. Dylan slammed his hand on the table. You're insane. You can't just kick us out. I turned to him. You broke my things. You threatened me. I have proof. If you don't leave by tomorrow, the police will handle it. He kicked his chair over, face twisted. You think anyone cares about your stupid little life? You're nothing. The table rattled as he shoved it, a glass falling and shattering near my feet. Leanne tried to grab him, shouting his name, but he yanked away. Enough, I said, my voice steady. This is over. You'll pack your things tonight. Leanne's hands shook, her voice cracking. You'd do this to your own mother? After everything. I stared at her. You did this to yourself. She screamed then, high, raw, desperate, but I didn't move. Dylan stormed toward the hallway, muttering curses, slamming doors. I gathered the papers calmly, stacking them back into the folder. My heartbeat was loud but steady. The fear that used to live in me was gone. As I walked past her, she whispered, You'll regret this. I stopped at the door. Not this time, I said. Tomorrow you're gone. And for the first time, she believed me. The next morning, they acted like nothing had happened. Leanne made coffee, humming the same tune she used to when she wanted to mask tension. Dylan avoided eye contact, but kept tossing glances my way, testing me. I didn't say a word. The folder was already in my car, every piece of proof stacked and ready. By noon, Leanne decided to push back. She stood in the doorway of my room, arms folded. You think you scared us? She said. You won't call anyone. You're bluffing. You wouldn't dare embarrass your own family like that. I looked at her calm. Then stay. Let's see what happens. Her expression flickered, but she kept her voice steady. You wouldn't. I walked past her and stepped outside, dialing the number I'd already saved the night before. The call was brief. I told the sheriff everything, every lie, every document, every recording. They said they'd come by within the hour. When the patrol car pulled up, the color drained from her face. Dylan came out of the house, confused, phone in hand. What's going on? Leanne hissed under her breath. Say nothing. The sheriff greeted me, polite but firm. We received your report, ma'am. You have the evidence. I handed over the folder. He flipped through it, pausing at the forged documents. This is enough. Leanne stepped forward, voice sharp. She's lying. That's my daughter. You can't just take her word for it. The sheriff met her eyes. Ma'am, your daughter has legal ownership of this property. You're trespassing. And these documents link to active fraud accounts in your name. Dylan's face went white. Wait, what? He turned to her, voice rising. You told me it was fine. You said she wouldn't do anything. Shut up, she snapped. He stepped back, shaking his head. You used me. You said we'd get a fresh start, not end up in jail. Two deputies moved closer. Leanne's voice cracked as she started to beg, switching between anger and tears. You can't do this. I'm her mother. She owes me. I didn't answer. I just stood there while they read her rights. Dylan shouted as they tried to pull her toward the car. Mom, do something. She screamed his name, but he backed away, hands trembling. I'm not going down for you. The air was heavy, thick with the sound of her yelling as they closed the door. Dylan followed the sheriff's deputy without a fight, still cursing under his breath, still blaming her. I watched the car pull away, the dust rising from the tires. The house behind me felt hollow, stripped of all noise. I waited for some kind of feeling, satisfaction, relief, anger, but nothing came. Just stillness. For years, I'd dreamed of her coming back, of an ending that made sense. Standing there in the quiet, I understood there wouldn't be one. As the sirens faded down the road, all that remained was the sound of my own breathing, and the weight of finally being free, too heavy to feel like victory. The house was quiet again, but it didn't feel like mine. Every room still carried traces of them. Fingerprints on the walls, faint perfume in the hallway, the dent in the couch where Dylan used to sprawl. Even the air felt heavier, like their voices had soaked into the wood. I cleaned every surface twice, scrubbed until my hands ached, but no amount of effort could wash away the memory of their presence. Days passed in slow silence. I tried to fill the space with sound, music, the radio, anything, but the quiet always crept back in. Sometimes, at night, I'd catch myself listening for footsteps that would never come again. The peace I thought I wanted didn't feel peaceful at all. It felt hollow. Grant stopped by one afternoon, leaning on the fence like he always did. He didn't ask questions, just looked at me with that steady calm of his. "Heard they're gone," he said. "They are," I answered, my voice flat. He nodded, then handed me a small paper bag. Inside were cookies and a note that said, "You did what you had to." No lecture, no pity, just quiet understanding. We sat outside for a while, saying nothing, the way people do when words would only make things heavier. It was Grant who suggested therapy. "You've been surviving a long time," he said gently. "Maybe it's time to start living instead." So I went. The first session was hard. I spent most of it staring at the carpet, unable to speak. But over time, the words started to come. I talked about the window I used to wait by, the nights in foster homes, the way my mother's voice could twist guilt into obedience. The therapist didn't tell me to forgive her. She told me to stop carrying her weight. That was the first thing that made sense. Weeks turned into months. The house began to breathe again. I opened windows, painted walls, rearranged furniture. Little by little, it started to feel like mine again. Not the place where I was broken, but where I began to heal. Then one morning, a plain envelope showed up in my mailbox. No return address, just my name written in the handwriting I knew too well. My chest tightened as I opened it. Inside was a short letter. "Tessa, I'm sorry things turned out this way. I made mistakes, but you have to understand, I did what I had to. Life isn't easy, and you'll see that someday. Maybe when you're a mother yourself, you'll understand me. I still love you. Always, Mom." The words blurred as I read them. There it was again, an apology wrapped in excuses. The same pattern even now. I stood in the kitchen for a long moment, the paper trembling between my fingers. Then I struck a match, watched the edge catch, the flame spreading across her handwriting. The ashes curled inward, small and gray, until nothing was left. When the last spark died, I exhaled. For the first time, the house felt truly empty, and finally, that emptiness felt like peace. Months passed, each one a little quieter than the last. The house stood still, sunlight slipping through the blinds onto floors that no longer felt familiar. I'd fixed what was broken, replaced what was lost, but every time I looked around, I saw ghosts of what had happened. I'd fought so hard to reclaim it, but now it only reminded me of everything I'd endured. One morning, I sat at the kitchen table with a mug of coffee gone cold and realized I didn't belong there anymore. That house had been my armor, but now it felt like a cage built from memories I didn't need to keep. The next week, I put it on the market. When the offer came through, I signed the papers without hesitation. With the sale settled, I drove out to a small stretch of land by a lake about an hour north. The moment I saw it, something inside me loosened. The air was crisp, the water calm, the world too quiet for anyone to raise their voice. I bought it that same day. No neighbors close enough to pry, no shadows of the past lingering in court, just open space and silence that didn't hurt. While I waited for the final paperwork, I made one last move. The sheriff's department had returned my folder after the case closed, and in it were the details of every fraudulent account Leanne had created. I filed the necessary forms, rerouting everything legally into my name, every false loan, every unpaid balance, so she could never use my identity again. The records were sealed, unreachable, the damage she caused now locked under my control. It wasn't revenge in the way I used to imagine it. There was no satisfaction in watching her suffer, no thrill in payback. My victory was quiet, simple. She could no longer reach me or anyone else. Her name no longer held power over mine. I packed lightly when I left, just clothes, a few photos, and the dog-eared book I'd carried through every home I'd ever lived in. The rest I donated or left behind. Before closing the door for the last time, I walked through each room once more. The echoes were gone. Outside, the air smelled of rain and fresh soil. I looked at the path leading away from the house, then back at the front porch where I'd once waited for her return as a child. For years, that part of me had been frozen there, always expecting something that would never come. I whispered into the stillness, "You left me once. Now I'm the one walking away." The words didn't sound angry, just true. I got in my car and drove. The road wound through the trees, the sky opening wider the farther I went. The house disappeared behind the hills, shrinking into a memory I no longer needed to keep alive. When the lake finally came into view, the water caught the afternoon light and shimmered like a promise. I stopped the car, rolled the window down, and let the wind fill the silence. Not forgiven, not forgotten, but finished. Do you think I did the right thing by walking away and finally cutting them out of my life? Or should I have given them another chance? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this.